What is cracking, everybody? Hello and welcome back to Gaming 101 with Mr. Berger. Tonight, I brought Two Fangs back. This is her butt, actually. Where's her head? Say hi, Two Fangs. There she goes. She's gonna look better in this new webcam, hopefully, but we'll see if I can actually get her up there. There she is. Of course, it's gonna be a little bit blurry if I, shove her right up there. Anyway, let's get back to what's going on here. And guys, tonight, I'm calling this the SPLASHBOW deck. So it's basically like the Splashyard deck that I covered not too long ago. You know, the bowler is meta. I think that's the deck that I covered with, or the video that I used to cover that deck. So it's really similar to that deck, but basically the major difference, of course, is the win condition. So you change out the graveyard for an Xbow. The other only difference is instead of poison, you're running Fireball for that immediate damage, rather than the damage over time and the synergy with the graveyard. So it's very much a control deck, so keep that in mind. And again, guys, if you are looking for more specific tips on how to play most of the cards, but with a different win condition, definitely take a moment to check out that video that I did on the Splashyard deck, and it'll kind of go over how to use these cards and the strategy behind the deck and everything. Now this deck's going to be a little bit different because, of course, you're playing the Xbow rather than the graveyard, so it's not nearly as aggressive generally. It's a lot more of a control deck. It's a lot more defensive. Sometimes you don't use that Xbow major win condition until very late in the game. In fact, what happened was I found this deck on TV, Royale, a while back, and I really wanted to catch that replay and even incorporate it into my video, but unfortunately those things get wiped pretty quickly. And this YouTube channel is just a side thing. I work and I go to the gym and I've got my dog and my snake, obviously, and my girlfriend and volunteer work and all kinds of stuff. So, I don't get around to the videos as soon as I want to necessarily. Sometimes it takes me a little while. So I didn't get to catch that replay in here. But in the replay, the guy that was playing this deck was super patient and super defensive and hung on to that Xbow until 2 minutes or a minute or two into overtime, actually, and used it on defense quite a bit from there on out, and then just got one successful offensive Xbow push at the end and won with that. So I was really impressed. I'm like, this is really cool because I really like that Splashyard deck. It's a deck that I've had some of the most fun with in a long time, if that makes sense. It's one of my favorite decks for a while now. In the past, I don't know, a few months or so or something like that. So I was happy to see an Xbow version of it. I'm not really a big Siege player, honestly. I play Siege on my alt account sometimes just for fun, but I don't generally play it majorly. I don't push with it or anything. I'm still kind of working out the kinks and stuff. Regardless, I was like, alright, let's give this thing a shot. I've done pretty well with it. I've got 8 wins in a challenge, which for me personally, that's pretty good, because I generally get anywhere between 3 to 6. So, guys, I'm not a very good player, as I've said a million times. I don't claim to be. I'm not trying to show off that I'm a good player or anything like that. I just like, covering decks and talking about strategies and archetypes and things like that. So, I definitely, even though I'm not that great at Siege, I definitely was interested in this deck and giving it a shot, trying out the Xbow version of this kind of Splashyard deck. So I'm calling it SPLASHBOW. Now, I was going to talk about Royal Recruits and how this deck counters it a lot, but by the time I got around to recording this video, I actually wrote the outline before it happened, but now when I'm recording it, it's after it's happened. The Royal Recruits got a really heavy nerf. Their elixir cost got increased to 8. So if you do start to see Royal Recruits, there is a lot of stuff to counter them with this deck. There's a lot of things in this deck that counter swarmy units or big pushes, because you got so much splash damage, and then of course you got the Inferno Dragon to counter any heavy tank or anything like that. So if you do see the Royal Recruits, you can tornado them all together and bowler them down, or Ice Wizard them down, or Royal Ghost them down. A lot of splash damage. So you can see here really quickly, I want to talk about this. The reason I placed the Xbow there is I was trying to get it to lock on to the elixir pump across the map there, but it didn't do what I wanted, and he placed a lot of defense there, so I ended up just using the Fireball to counter it instead. So again, guys, tons of splash synergy, so make use of that splash synergy. Use the tornado defensively to shut down hogs and pull them into the tower like that. Always do that. But if they don't have that major win condition where you need to use the tornado to shut it down, a hog or a goblin barrel or something like that, you can use the tornado to really synergize with like your Royal Ghost splash damage, your Ice Wizard splash damage, your E-Wiz's Enter the Arena splash damage, and of course the Bowler. Hey, even the Fireball, right? All that stuff synergizes really well with the Tornado. So take advantage of that for sure. Alright, let's talk about openers, opening moves, opening plays, all that good stuff. There's a lot of openers that you have in this deck. One of my favorite things to do in a deck like this, or in a deck that has Royal Ghost, is to cycle the Royal Ghost in the back as an opener. Just because he's kind of like, he's got that unique invisibility thing. I can't recall, does he take damage if they try to like fireball him and hit the tower? I think he doesn't when he's invisible, unless they change that, or unless I'm completely mistaken. Somebody can let me know in the comment section below. And anyway, he only costs 3 as well. He's relatively tanky, you got that splash damage. Just he's a pretty safe card to play as an opener in the back for only 3 elixir. You've also got that Ice Wizard, also only 3 elixir. I like cycling Bowler in the back too because he's really slow. I generally don't like to E-Wiz as an opener because he's kind of speedy. I like using my slower units first and allowing them to, like, you know, slowly walk up the map and get a big push going, rather than having something that just runs up and dies, right? But you got a bunch of support units that you can use as openers, so, you know, try different things out. Generally I would go with like Royal Ghost or Ice Wizard or something as my opener if I have them in my hand. Alright, let's see, what else? The Inferno Dragon, as I mentioned, you can use him to counter heavy units. So again guys, tons of splash synergy, so Swarm units are going to be cake, and then when you get the Golem or the Giant or whatever coming down the lane, then you, that's when you use your Tornado. What am I talking about? That's when you use your Inferno Dragon. Tornado to kill the, you know, Swarm units, and then Inferno Dragon to kill that big tank. Okay, let's see, what else, or what's next? Now, again, I know I mentioned this earlier, but this is really important. When you see them send in that first Hog, first Royal Ghost, even like a Valkyrie or a Knight, even if you want to take a little bit of damage on your tower, you could even do it with like a balloon. I think it's possible to do it. There's a ton of units you can do this with. That is to tornado it into your King Tower and activate your King Tower. Generally, the major thing you do that with is a Hog, and from then on out, every single time that they send in a Hog by itself, all you got to do is get that perfectly placed tornado right in the middle of the arena, right where it clips the Hog's path, you know, running down the pathway there, and pulls it towards the center, and that completely shuts down the Hog for only 3 elixir. The Hog costs 4, so it's always a positive elixir trade every time they send in a solo Hog, as long as you have that tornado in hand. And that only occurs once you've activated that King Tower. So activating that King Tower is really important. Not only that, but I mean, it just provides a bunch of extra DPS against anything else that's on either of your Princess Towers within melee range, or even sometimes close range. You know, and just having that extra tower blowing things up is huge. It can provide you with so much more defensive potential and value and positive elixir trades and so on and so forth. So make use of that for sure. Now let's talk about the Xbow in this deck. The Splashyard version, you definitely use the Graveyard offensively most of the time. You can use it defensively, and I did cover that in that video, I believe, that I did on it. But in this deck, you oftentimes are going to actually use your Xbow defensively, as if it was like a cannon or a Tesla. You kind of play it in that 4-2 spot, right in the center of your side of the arena as a defensive structure. Now the reason for that is because this is a very much a controlled deck, and so you really want to go for that battlefield control, and you don't necessarily need to go for a big major push or get a lot of damage early on. The only thing you need to do, as with most Xbow decks, is just get that one big lock-on onto their tower. Get that one lock-on where your Xbow has a lot of health, and it's really well supported because you've got an elixir advantage and you've got a Bowler in front of it and an Ice Wizard behind it or whatever, and it locks onto the opponent's Princess Tower and just does like 1,000 or 2,000 damage to it. And at that point you'll see, oftentimes, you know, I'll end up just Fireball cycling, or Fireball Zap cycling. Actually no, I'm sorry, I don't run Zap in this deck, but I'll end up just Fireball cycling the opponent's Princess Tower to finish it off, because I got that one solid lock-on with the Xbow, maybe a little bit of chip damage with like an Ice Wizard or something like that, and then eventually you just get low enough where all you gotta do is Fireball it to death. So yeah, definitely don't be afraid to use the Xbow on defense, right? So that you can go for that super, like, positive elixir trade in the long run, or board control with positive elixir trades in the long run, to get that one good Xbow on offense. And I saw this in the replay. You can even go to a point in double elixir time where you get one on defense, use it and support it on defense, and then get a second one up at the same time on offense, you know, placed at the bridge in the offensive spot so that it locks onto the Princess Tower and has the original Xbow providing additional support for it, you know, behind it. So usually you're going to win by one tower, or you're going to play into a draw. And I did play into a draw. Oh, hi there. She's saying hi to me. I did play into a draw once or twice with this deck already. And it's very much, you know, as you could imagine, it's an Xbow deck and it's a control deck. So there's definitely a lot of potential for draws. That's just generally the case with Xbow decks most of the time. So don't be afraid to do that if you have to, alright? You know, play into the draw if you need to. And if you are planning on winning, don't necessarily expect to get a bunch of 3 crowns. This is like a slow-paced, you're going to get the 1 crown win kind of deck. So just go for that 1 Princess Tower, play defense from then on out, or play defense the whole game until you get that opportunity to get that awesome Xbow placement out, fully support it, and just absolutely wreck their tower, and then maybe fireball it twice to finish it off, right? That's kind of how you play this deck overall. Alright guys, I just want to mention a couple other things, and this is obvious, but I want to mention it again because it's really important. You do have 2 wizards in this deck. You got the Ice Wiz and the E-Wiz, so do be careful using them both close to each other or down the same lane, because then they're very susceptible to being destroyed by one spell, like a Fireball or a Fireball Zap combo or a Rocket or something like that, because they have the same range, if I'm not mistaken, and they have the same health. So just one Fireball, they're naturally going to end up next to each other because of their same range. So one Fireball can take them both out, give your opponent a massive positive elixir trade, which you definitely don't want. Now, another thing that might be kind of obvious, but I do want to make sure to point this out, is you want to generally save your E-Wiz for things like Inferno Dragons, Inferno Towers, maybe even Sparky if they're running Sparky. You know, things that, oh hi there, things that power up and charge up and do more damage over time, and they can be interrupted. You know, so you're going to see a lot of Inferno Dragons in challenges, and the Inferno Dragon does a pretty good job of shutting down like the Bowler, because he's tanky. It also counters your Xbow pretty well, so make sure that you save that E-Wiz for countering that if you know that they're running the Inferno Dragon, or something along the lines of that, right? Alright, so the Bowler, he's good in the current meta. He counters Witch, which there was a lot of Witches for a little while because she got buffed really hard. There's not as many now, but I think she's still relatively prevalent. He counters Royal Recruits, and again, I was expecting a lot more of those because they're so strong, but they just gave them that emergency nerf, so they're not as good now. But if you do see them, yeah, he does a pretty good job of shutting them down. Right? And yeah, so that Bowler, he's great in splash decks, synergizes really well with the Tornado, and even though he hasn't received any direct buffs, just the shifting in the meta has caused him to kind of become a pretty powerful card and become very prevalent in the meta. Alright guys, let's really quickly go over some card replacements, and then that will pretty much be it for the video. So if you don't have the Ice Wiz and you want to replace it with something else, go to free-to-play replacements would probably be the Musketeer or the Archers, just some sort of cheap support unit. Archers play a very similar role to the Ice Wizard and also only cost 3, so that's my go-to replacement for them. If you'd rather do the Musketeer, that's always pretty much interchangeable with the Archers. Next, really quickly though, Musketeer is more susceptible to Fireball and cost 4, whereas the Archers only cost 3, so that'll change the dynamic a little bit, so just keep that in mind. The Bowler, if you don't have Bowler or you don't have him at high level or you don't like him, you probably play like the Executioner. That works really well with the Tornado and Splash decks. Maybe like the Valkyrie, that's another melee unit, but she's just so buff right now, and I just think that she would fit into a Splash deck like this really well. She's also really tanky. She's tankier than the Bowler now. She's got more health than the Bowler, so it's pretty crazy. So that's actually a pretty, now that I think about it more, pretty viable replacement for the Bowler. Or you could just run the Witch, because she's beefy now too, so she's really tanky like the Bowler. Not as tanky as the Bowler, I don't think, but she's up there, got a lot of HP now. Lives through a Fireball Zap. And she's got that splash damage too. I think she would work pretty well with this kind of splash themed deck. If you don't have the Inferno Dragon, you could run Inferno Tower if you want, or just run Mega Minion. It's another similar elixir cost flying unit that plays a very similar role to the Inferno Dragon. Kind of just good at shutting down either support units or providing a lot of extra DPS to high health units like tanks. It doesn't shut down tanks quite as well, obviously, but it does a decent job. Alright, for the E-Wiz, maybe another support unit, maybe even the Zappies for the stun would work out for that E is there. If you don't like the zappies, then just play another support unit like the Musketeers, the Archers, or something like that. For the Royal Ghost, I think my go-to replacement for the Royal Ghost would be probably the Knight, maybe the Dark Prince. Dark Prince got some really, not really heavy nerfs, but some pretty decent nerfs recently. So he might not be the best go-to replacement, but if you like him and you've got him leveled up and you're playing it on ladder, then yeah, definitely run Dark Prince in the place of Royal Ghost. He's a pretty good go-to replacement. Of course, Valkyrie would work out really well in there too. Valkyrie to me is kind of like the new Royal Ghost. I'm sorry, the new Dark Prince, because she's really strong right now. She's super buff right now. I think they're going to nerf her soon. She plays a similar role. She's tanky. She's got splash damage, so on and so forth. For Fireball, you could replace it with poison, maybe arrows, or even rocket. The Fireball has a nice synergy with the Xbow deck, though, because it provides you some, immediate answers to whatever they might put down in front of your Xbow to try to destroy it. For Xbow, if you want to run the graveyard version of this, you could do that, or another win condition. Honestly, I feel like there's so many cards in this deck that work together so well. The fact that I saw that the graveyard version, they just switched it out with an Xbow, switched the graveyard out with an Xbow and just switched the poison out with the Fireball, and it like works great, makes me feel like this is one of those decks that actually would work with a lot of different win conditions. So try slapping in like a Hog in there, maybe even like a Battle Ram or something fun like that, whatever win condition you like. Go tanky with it. It might even work if you put like a Giant or a Golem in there or something, right? Either way, the original version ran Graveyard, and if you're going to run Graveyard, run Poison. And check out that video that I did on that, the Bowler is Meta video, if you haven't already, because that covers that specific deck and goes into more detail on how to play it. For the Tornado, maybe like a defensive structure, maybe like a Tesla or a Cannon would work out. The only problem with that is it takes away from that splash synergy. You don't have anything to pull them all together and then blow them all up with your Royal Ghost, your Ice Wizard, and your Bowler's splash damage, right? So if you have Tornado, I would highly recommend it. If you don't, maybe a defensive structure. Tesla is really good in the current meta. It's just so strong. It one-shots minions and goblins and stuff now, and just does a ton of damage, and it's beefy, and it survives when it's not above ground. It survives rockets or whatever when it's below ground and everything like that. So I would recommend Tesla in the place of Tornado if you're going to run some sort of a defensive structure. Alright guys, that is pretty much it as far as strategy goes. So let's go ahead and talk about the rest of this replay here. This was kind of just a filler replay because I was still wanting to talk about card replacements, but this is just kind of like a Golem Freeze deck that my opponent was running. And you can see at this point he kind of desperately tries to freeze my stuff, but there's really nothing he can do anymore. Take that last tower, and that pretty much ends it. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate it as always. If you have any questions or suggestions, don't hesitate to comment. I love it when people comment, and I love responding to those comments. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and have a good night.
Whoa.